Hello and welcome to Barbara's podcast. This is the show for women, all about health, nutrition, and wellness. It's the show that will empower you and inspire you to create a healthier lifestyle.
Hello and welcome. I'm Barbara Carafocus, and I'm thrilled to introduce Mark Ryall, a writer, triathlete, a coach, and especially to his daughter. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Barbara. I'm so excited to be on your show.
Me too. Would you like to share with us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I'm a retired teacher. I spent most of my life teaching and coaching. So I taught economics and I coached hockey, it's ice hockey, and golf, but primarily cross country running and track and field. So that's my background in a nutshell.
Yeah. So your first novel, Age-Decoded, delves into the world of genetic engineering and its impact on humanity. What inspired you to explore this topic in a speculative fiction setting, and what messages or insights do you hope readers will take away from it?
Yeah, so I'm 64 years old now, and so I'm in the twilight of my life, I guess. And in talking with other triathletes, I discovered that we're all, trying to do our best and trying to fend off old age and trying to keep our fitness levels up. But it's inevitably, being human, we all do grow older. So I started reading about some of the things going on to prevent aging or to, sort of promote.
Slow it down.
Yeah, exactly. Longevity, let's say, promote longevity. And the genetic engineering came up in a serious way. There's good research going on at Harvard and Kyoto University and other places that are looking into literally trying to stop humans from aging, to eradicate what they see as the disease of aging. I don't necessarily see it that way, but that's one way they're framing it. And so I thought, hey, what would it be like if we lived in a world where they use, say, CRISPR technology to stop aging and even reverse? Some are even talking about reversing aging. So that was the stimulation for my book. The message in the book is that, like all technologies, it would be a two-edged, double-edged sword, and we would have to be very wary of such a fundamental change to make humans immortal, right?
Those of us that don't know what CRISPR technology is, could you just enlighten us?
Sure. It's the preeminent technology right now for genetic engineering. So it allows scientists or researchers to go into a DNA, whether live DNA, whether it's humans or some other species, and literally edit the genetic code in there, remove things, add things, change things. And there was a Nobel Prize awarded for it a couple years ago on that front. So it's the parameter. It may change. It could be some other technology that moves forward, but it's very powerful genetic engineering technology. It's being used right now on many fronts. It's very, very powerful.
It's all very, very interesting, I guess, thinking what technology can do for our health. Well, I was more interested in your second book, to be honest, Run Daughter, Run Father, which focuses on running, racing, and the training adventures you shared with your daughter, Stephanie. So what motivated you to write this book, and what do you believe are the key takeaways for both younger and older age group competitors?
My motivation was that if you look at the cover here of this book,
yes,
it's the motivation is my love for my daughter. Really, it's a spiritual thing first and foremost. So that's why I showed a picture of her before she was even running. She's my daughter, right? So that father-daughter bond type thing. was the motivation. But the story was that Stephanie, when she was 8, had this desire to start running around the block. She said to my wife and I, my wife Lynn, she said, "I want to go run around the block, and can you time me?" And we're like, "Oh, where's this coming from?" I had done some running in high school, but I had stopped long ago, so I was pretty lazy at that point. I was about 45 years old, her father, and so I went with her, and it got me off the couch. I had to find a pair of sneakers again and start running in my midlife.
Yeah.
And so she got me, and that's why I call it run daughter, run father. Run daughter brought the father back in, and we formed a special bond over this pastime, distance running. And we still have this bond today, almost 20 years later. And so I attribute that to my daughter. And so I felt compelled to write about that. It also ties in with a little bit like my sci-fi book and the themes of intergenerational bonding, which is big in the sci-fi book. Sort of dealing with your mortality. So as an age group runner for myself, but also for her being an age group runner, being a young runner, and all the issues around that, which we may want to talk about. Even some female issues for females, younger females. So yeah, that was the inspiration for it, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. How did you manage to go through any challenges during her teenage years?
Yeah, there were a few, because now I have the coach hat on, and I'm her father, and I was also running with her. Like she was one heck of a runner. By the time she was 14, she became, now at that point, now I'm like over 50. She was then faster than me. So, but up to that point, I was running with her, and we were doing some pretty good workouts. But I was primarily coaching her because she wasn't quite in high school yet, so she didn't really have any good coaches yet. Now she's in good hands at the university level. And then just being your father, so trying to cheer her on, and it was tough because they were the main, and she says this in the preface to the book. She says, "My father and I butted heads many times." And it was primarily over me wanting to run more races, train harder, and him trying to dial me in and temper my enthusiasm. So that was the main fissure between us. I remember even some shouting matches over this. It was tough. But we still were very close through that time. But that was, if we ever had any arguments, it was primarily over that. She just wanted to do more and was very enthusiastic, very eager. And young athletes, female or male, have to be very, very cautious when they're 10, 12, 13, 14 years old. Even older people, mature adults, have to watch out for overtraining and things like that. But young people, they've got to be very, very especially careful. There's no rush with them.
No, but I think it's an incredible achievement that you've managed to train with your daughter or exercise with your daughter when many parents struggle with their children just to get them to exercise or stick to a sport. So I think well done that you managed.
Thank you. Yeah, I was lucky. It was all based on her enthusiasm. You take it from there, right? So
yeah, for sure. So how did you get into triathlon? I'm very interested because I'm also a triathlete, up to the sprint level so far.
Good,
so,
good for you. Yeah. When did you start trying the triathlon?
I started about it must be about 6 years ago. 7 years ago. I had a mini break during COVID years.
Yes.
Lost my rhythm there. I don't know what happened, but now I'm getting back into it with the full speed.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm fairly new to it also, so maybe 8 years. Still trying to learn how to swim. So, but
that's my strength.
Oh, good. I envy you. Well, so yeah, I got into it. A friend at school, a phys ed head named Chris Zielinski, was doing these triathlons, and he said to me, "Mark, why don't you try triathlon. I said, well, only two problems with that. I can't bike and I can't swim. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. You know, come on for some bike rides with me. We'll start there. And I started doing that. And you know, I'd actually enjoyed it because by that point I was in my mid 50s. And it was nice out on the bike. It felt like I was floating, you know, like I felt like I was, you know, you're not pounding your legs like running.
Wow.
You don't have those eccentric muscle contractions, right?
Yeah.
And the joint stress. So I sort of enjoyed it. And you could go for 2 or 3 hours and not feel stiff or, you know, and get a good workout and all that. And it was pretty around the farmlands up here in near Toronto, Canada. So, and then I jumped in the pool and made a, you know, really embarrassed myself. But he started trying to teach me how to swim, and I learned at least the basics of swimming. So, and swimming is floating too. You are floating. On the bike, you feel like you're floating. Swimming, you really are floating. So I like the cross training effect. I didn't stop running, but I wasn't running quite as much. I was running 4 or 5 times a week and doing these other things. So I'm glad I got into it. And yeah, so I'm pretty serious about the triathlon now. Yes.
Well, I'm very impressed. Well, you've represented Canada in international triathlon competitions in Switzerland and Spain. Have you got any memorable, experiences to share with us?
Sure, some great failures. Actually, okay, one success. I just did come back from Spain 2 weeks ago, and my wife joined me. Then we did a trip to Spain, but the front end of the trip was the World Triathlon Championship. So I did represent my country, Canada. There were 10 other fellows in my age group, I was in the 60 to 64 group. And I had a pretty good race. I had a bit of vertigo in the morning. I don't know, once in a while I get vertigo, not too often, but I had some vertigo. So, but I sort of came around just in time for the race, and I made it through the race, and I ended up middle of the pack. I was like 50th out of 100 competitors, which was pretty good. I felt like, okay, that's nice, because the previous time, 3 years ago, in maybe 3 or 4 years ago in Switzerland, I had a abysmal failure. I did not finish the race. I didn't make it through the swim. The water in Lake Geneva was a little bit too warm for wetsuit allowance, so they banned wetsuits, and I pretty much depend on my wetsuit to stay buoyant and at all efficient. So I knew it would be tough, and then that morning the wind was up, the waves were up. I thought, oh my God, I made it about 600 meters, and I just surrendered. I put my hands up, and they took me in, and
they came and picked you up.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was a DNF, which is, after all that planning and training and qualifying, you feel bad about it. But 3 years later, I finally got the job done, so I feel good about that. So.
Well, I guess you could always work on your swimming. We have an excellent coach here, so it's all about technique.
It is, and that's the fascinating thing about it. Like, running is almost a pure physiological sport. There's almost no skill to the actual running action, and cycling is actually, I hate to say, fairly similar. I mean, there's still a lot of thinking about how you train and all that, and what equipment you use. But swimming is very skillful, very, very technique oriented.
Yeah.
Compared to the other two. So I actually taking lessons right now, because I just qualified for next year again. So I just found out I qualified last week to go back to another part of Spain. And so I've got another year to get better at swimming.
Yeah, no, you do. I mean, this is it. We challenge ourselves, don't we? I think at the end of the day, it's you compete, you see if you did better than you did last year.
Yeah, exactly. And so my daughter is experimenting with things too. She's still running. She's 25 years old, and she is been trying some trail runs, like ultra trail runs and things like that. So good for her. She's done some 50K trail runs, which is a little longer than a marathon, with a lot of hill elevation changes. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. And but this weekend she's going to do a 5K road race with those new fancy carbon-plated shoes. See how that goes, So she's experimenting. She's still running. She's pretty competitive and still loves it. And she's never been seriously injured. And in the preface to my book, she does thank me for that, for showing her how to just temper yourself and be careful. Because there are stories some young females, especially who have, let's say, run into some physiological problems because of pushing too hard in their teen years, when you don't have to rush it as a runner. There's lots of time, to develop yourself. So
I was going to say, as a nutritionist, I'm always interested, did you follow a specific diet? Do you follow a specific diet to fuel yourself as a triathlon athlete?
Yeah, so Stephanie and I had relatively normal diets, balanced, but carbohydrates were, complex carbohydrates were important. Stephanie had some anemia issues at one point, so she did have to make sure she took in enough iron. And she did some iron supplements to that. She also had some asthma, so she had to so she grew out of that, but in high school that was an issue. Her lungs would tie up, whatever, and that's very frustrating. So she had that, but there wasn't much you could do. Maybe you probably know more about this on the asthma front, but she did take the bronchodilator before a race, and she took a pill called Singular, which was supposed to give you a little more protection. But basically, I think Mother Nature and her just outgrew it. But I did some stupid things I could tell your listeners about on the carbohydrate front. People probably know if you need carbohydrates for endurance exercise, you store it in your liver and your other areas of your body as glycogen and as a main fuel for distance events, for triathlon or whatever. So I was really trying hard to get my weight down to my racing weight for a half marathon. And this was about 10 years ago. So I thought, I'll just drive down my weight by not eating carbohydrates, right? So that worked. When I told the starting line of the Toronto half marathon, I was right at the weight I wanted to be. But of course, your listeners are probably laughing, and I'm sure you're trying to hold back right now. I basically was depriving myself of the energy I needed for that race. So I felt pretty good for the first 10K. I was right at the pace I wanted, a good pack of runners. And then I think I almost hit the wall in a half marathon. Not many people can accomplish that. That's pretty stupid. Because I remember the last 3K, I'm thinking, why am I slowing down so much? What's going on? I felt like, those dreams where you're running and you feel like you're running through Milan. You can't run. That's what it felt like. So I think I actually almost hit the wall, ran out of glycogen in a half marathon just because of a stupid diet, right? So Stephanie and I were careful. We eat lots of vegetables, lots of carbohydrates and fat also. And let's face it, some junk food too, right?
Yeah.
But with iron supplements, Stephanie was okay. And with learning things about how to manage your carbohydrates, that was important. Women who are having their period, like Stephanie learned that, they have to be careful about hydrating and more carbohydrates prior to a long race. There's a triathlete, I think I remember her name, who just talked about that. She won in the world championships, big race. She was talking about her diet and her fluid for if she's in that, and her body temperature too, if she's in the final 1 or 2 weeks prior to a period where the body temperature goes up. I didn't even know that, but Stephanie's learned those things too. So that's a unique to women issue. But again, I think, sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, I was going to just say to factor that, that it's important to factor these differences in that we have as men and women, I guess. There's things we've got to think about.
Yes, yeah. So the important thing, though, for Stephanie was long-term athletic development. Just be careful. There are a couple of cases in the United States. Mary Kane is a good example. She's an outstanding runner, set all the high school records in grade 10 and grade 11. Now she's writing a book about how she pushed her body too hard, was amanoretic, and is now dealing with osteoporosis and some other issues. And she felt like she had her weight weighed down for too long and pushed herself too hard. So there's a syndrome there called REDS, generally called that, which is relative energy deficiency syndrome. She feels she suffered from that. So maybe her coaches pushed her too hard too, but she blames herself too. So, and also Bobby Clay, who was another outstanding runner from the UK around the same time period, smashing all the high school records and running in the world championships. Bobby Clay is suffering from some of the same issues and talking about it. So that is the thing you want to avoid, all younger female runners making their adult running, jeopardizing it. So
there's a fine line between you've got to nourish your body. Yes, you've got to, you think about your racing weight, but not to the extent where you're not nourishing your body enough. I think that's quite important.
Yep, exactly. Stephanie wouldn't mind me also saying that, and I checked with her before this podcast, that she, in grade 10, unbeknownst to me, was limiting her food intake a bit, which is approaching an eating disorder, but it wasn't severe. She wasn't bulimic, but she was looking around, reading about other competitors, trying to drive her body weight down, and maybe not intaking enough food, like really starting to toy with her diet that way. That can also be an issue, again, especially it seems for females, but not just females. But yeah,
so as parents, we've got to keep our eyes open, I guess, and make sure.
Yeah, I was oblivious to that. She didn't even talk to me about that till she was in university. But I think she nipped it in the bud. It wasn't a long-term issue. But that is an issue that distance runners of all face. There's a great book called Running with the Buffaloes. Running with the Buffaloes. I don't know if you've heard about the University of Colorado State University. Mark Wentworth, who won the Coach of the Year of the NCAA many times. He has great teams down there. But it's written through the narrative of a person on that team, and they're all on the edge. They're all being pushed, and they're all that's the nature of it. You're pushing yourself you want to stress your body, but they're all on the edge of overstress, and it's just, you can just feel it in all the competitors who are just on the verge of breaking down. The injuries are staring them in the face, and it is tough. Like you say, there's a fine balance there, and that's a great book for people who really want the inside scoop on pushing without breaking.
Well, that's one viewpoint. I read a book called Born to Run.
Yes, great book. Yeah.
Well, that's the other extreme. There's people that they're all relaxed. They're going to a race, they're joking, and off they go, and they're running, I don't know how many, 300 kilometers through the mountains, and they're not even wearing proper shoes, and they've drunk, a drink made out of chia seeds and lemon and sugar, and maybe they've got a burrito in their pouch, and that's it.
Yes, the Mexican, was it Tamara tribe? Yeah, amazing, amazing story. That's a great book too, because it talks about how running is natural for humans, right?
Yes.
And our ancestors had to run, and we can outrun any animal if we have enough distance to go. So you could outrun, I guess, a jaguar or something if you can see it in the distance and keep tracking it down. That's pretty cool. And it might be culture, it might be attitude, but so the ultra people really understand that, right? They can go to another level on distance and time. It's pretty fascinating. I've thought of maybe trying one myself, but I don't know. Have you thought of going like an ultra distance? Or
after I read the book, I had thought about it, but then I just kind of thought, well, what can my life absorb? In a sense, with the training, do I want to cut out some social events and seeing friends and, just be training all the time? And I just kind of thought, well, no, I'm happy with my little triathlons. I'm happy with that. No, not at the moment.
Yeah. So while you're doing the sprint triathlons, I imagine you might try the Olympic distance.
The Olympic, yeah.
Are you thinking of that, or?
I am. I think that's the next one up. I think that I should.
Okay. Well, good luck with that decision. Yeah. Hope you give it a go.
What distance did you?
I like the Olympic distance because you're not out there for 8 hours or anything, and the dietary intake is pretty simple. You don't have to do too much, right? You're not going to hit the wall because you're doing these varied exercises.
Yeah.
I did try a half Ironman once, and that almost destroyed me. So I can't imagine doing a full Ironman because my hamstrings tend to cramp up, things like that. And the swimming, I don't even know if I could swim 4 miles, whatever it is. So the half Ironman was a little bit too much. So I like the Olympic distance. For me, that's good enough. You're out there for about 2.5 hours, and you get a good feel for everything. For listeners, that's 1.5 kilometer swim, 40K bike. So you're on the bike for about an hour. The swim's about half an hour, and then the run is 10K, which is, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah,
it's manageable, and it's manageable to incorporate it in your life.
Yes. Yeah, my friend Chris that I mentioned, he's done some of the full ones, and they're training. They're on the bike for 4 hours, and I don't like biking indoors, so I don't like being on an indoor bike more than about an hour and a bit. I can just, even if I've got, So you're right. It's a huge time commitment. And so, you get a great benefit.
You've got to make sacrifices. Something's got to go.
Yeah.
Well, I see that you like playing snooker and you paint with acrylics, plus all this. Can you share any advice with our listeners who are interested in exploring multiple passions and pursuing a fulfilling and balanced life? How do you keep it all balanced?
Well, yeah, those things you mentioned, like the drawing, I never started that till maybe 12 years ago, so midlife.
Yeah.
Just as my wife is an artist, so I've sort of soaked up some skills from her, just watching her, and then she helped me with colors and all that. But I've never really give it a go, and I enjoy it. It's a great hobby. I do historical paintings. I do sports portraits too. It's fun, but I haven't done much lately because I've gotten into to this other sport you just mentioned, which is snooker, which can take up hours and hours of your time. It's like you can practice snooker for 10 hours a day because it doesn't hurt your body, right? So it's not taking a lot out of you physically, biomechanically. So yeah, you can. And so I'm learning that sport. That's a great sport. It's technical and it's fun. It's competitive. So that's a new sport for me. And then this writing has taken some time. I'm working on a third book right now. It's a sci-fi novel. So between all those things, I am retired, so I have time. I've done teaching, so I've got time, and I'm trying to make the best of it. So my advice to people is, don't pigeonhole yourself. If you're in your midlife or earlier or whatever, there's things within you that are probably going to show themselves at some stage when you're ready, personally ready. Maybe you've had your kids, they've moved out of the house, or you're retired, or you're semi-retired, or whatever. You want to give it a go. Don't pigeonhole yourself. There's things that you do not know that you will be doing, that you can do and have so much fun with, enrich your life with, and don't let anybody talk you out of it. Within you, there's a genuine self that is ready to express itself in so many ways. So it doesn't have to be your career at all. It could be so many other things. So give it a go, and you never know where it might lead you.
Thank you. I absolutely believe that. I think we shouldn't pigeonhole ourselves. There's so many facets to us. Why concentrate on one?
Exactly.
Yeah. finally, how would you like to be remembered by those you've influenced along the way?
Well, coaching is a good example. It's just nice to know that you helped somebody and guided them a bit. In sports, motivation's important. Talent matters, yes, but the other two things that are really important are opportunity and direction. I'm not making that up. That's from Jack Daniels, who's one of the great writers of distance training in the United States, physiologist and all that. So those last two, opportunity and direction, they're so important for a lot of athletes. And so I'd like to be remembered as someone who gave somebody a little more direction that they may not have had without coaching or whatever. That's touching. So if you talk to former athletes and they come back to you get a sense of that. And that's really makes me feel great. So
what's valuable, yeah. So in closing, please can you share with our listeners how they can get in touch with you or to buy the book?
Sure. Like I don't really have a website, but on Quora, which is a site where you can ask questions and exchange information. On Quora, we have a site called Run Free. I'm not the head moderator, but I'm a contributor to that. So Run Free is pretty good. You can see a lot of questions there on running and the questions that I've answered. That's a great forum for learning about or asking about running questions. So that's a good way to get to know me. I also deal with some other things on Quora, like I'm a contributor to aging site, so that relies on my scientific, my sci-fi novel, an aging and longevity site, and I answer a lot of questions there on genetic engineering. And I also interested in teaching. So you can, if you go onto Quora and type in Mark Ryall, MarkRyall, you'll see the sites that I'm contributing to and some of the exchanges I've had with people, most of whom I don't even know. But they have genuine questions. That's a great way to get to know me. Some of the answers are pretty funny too, like why my shopping escapades at IKEA and things like that. The books themselves, I imagine you'll have a retailer link that people can check out if they want to give the running book a read. It's called Run Daughter, Run Father. Here's the title.
Just a little note here. I would I'll put some of the links in the show notes. So
yes,
it'll be easy to click on them if they do want to.
Yeah, so that's fine. It's those books are available in ebook or hardcover. So yeah, so I'd just like to thank you for having this podcast and doing a podcast. It's quite a undertaking, and thanks for having me as a guest here.
Well, no, thank you, and it was lovely to have you as a guest. It was very interesting, and I'm sure our audience will find a lot of value in this.
Thank you very much, and good luck with your. I know you're going to do an Olympic triathlon, so good luck with that first one.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Barbara's podcast. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter or e-courses. Celebrate life, and see you at the next episode.